The Honourable John Carter.
Speaker, we heard the Minister of Finance talk about some of the positives that the country can look forward to from an economic point of view as we move forward, having recovered or trying to recover out of the mismanagement of the 9 years of a Labor government and, of course, a recession. And the fact is, Mr Speaker, that the Minister of Finance has some positives, and, of course, the budget is also going to look to put us into a budget surplus in the next 2 or 3 years. However, I'm also pleased to say, Mr Speaker, that on Monday I had the great pleasure and honour of releasing a document that was being prepared by the Ministry of Social Development and the Office of Senior Citizens called The Business of Ageing. And, Mr Speaker, I commend this this document, to the House and to every member of it, and indeed to everyone in New Zealand. And for this reason, Mr Speaker, times are changing and there are some positives that are going to happen around the baby boomers that we need to consider. Some of us, Mr Speaker, take some deep interest in what's happening in this regard because some of us are at the front end of the baby boomers. Mr Speaker, the point is that where there's been a debate around the ageing population, it's also, up till now, has been a negative debate. But actually there are lots of positives that need to be considered, and this document lays them out on the House so the discussion can start about the positive impact that the baby boomers and the generation going forward will have on this country and on this economy. And I want to quote one or two things out of this document, Mr Speaker, and then at the end of my speech I intend to seek leave to table it for the House to consider. And one of the things that I like to quote out of the front of this is a quote from John Baird, the Director of the Department of Ageing and Life Courses, and the quote is, "Governments around the world need to invent a new future to tackle the needs and possibilities of an ageing population. Business as usual is just not an option. A 70-year-old of today expects a different role to what their parents experienced. We need to be brave enough to invent a future that is not just simply a different shade of the past." And let's look at some of the facts that have come out, Mr Speaker, that are seriously interesting. The number of New Zealanders turning 65 in the 12-month period, 2000 June to 2012, is expected to be 18% higher than the preceding 12 months. That's 18% higher. By 2031, the number of New Zealanders aged 65 and over is expected to exceed 1 million, almost double the current number. An increase in the labour force participation rate of older people from 16% in 2010 to 26% by 2030 could offset the growing demands for funding New Zealand's superannuation over this period. Mr Speaker, there are positives happening, and the point is this, that no one is going to force this to happen, it's going to happen. And we as a nation need to start thinking about how we adapt and adopt the changes that the baby boomer generation are going to put before this nation. We have expectations. We've always, as a group, a generation, been leaders in this nation. We will be a quarter of the population by 2050, and we will have a huge impact on what happens in that time, and the nation needs to start to understand the different dynamics that this will bring. Mr Speaker, 7 to 10% of the labour force could be aged 65 and over by 2051. Their earnings of employment could rise from $1 billion to $10 billion in that time. Tax paid on earnings from employment could increase from $200 million to about $1.8 billion. Mr Speaker, we as a nation need to start understanding what this means. We need to have a discussion about the impact that the baby boomer generation are going to have. They will have lots of positives on this nation. We will make a huge contribution to the skill shortages that's coming up behind us, Mr Speaker. It'll have a huge impact on the productivity. It'll have a huge impact on the way in which the workforce responds to this. Mr Speaker, I commend this paper to the House, this document. It's worth reading. It's worth considering. Most importantly, Mr Speaker, it's worth discussing. Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, the Honourable John Carter.
Mr Speaker, I seek leave to table the document called the Business of Ageing.
Leave is sought to table that document. Is there any objection? Yes. Oh, there is objection. The Honourable Leanne Dalzell.
Speaker, the two